It is Sunday the 18th of September 2016. I am standing in front of the so-called Unitarian Church of Montreal, and I'm more or less engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, which include, but are by no means limited to, such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, and misuse of Canada's blasphemy law in Bill Cosby-style legal bullying that seeks to cover up and hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalists. And if you're wondering about the, vagueness of the language in terms of certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, well, that's a line lifted from the second of two arrogant and aggressive cease and desist demand letters that the Reverend Dr. Peter Morales-led Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston hired Stikeman Elliott Barristers and Solicitors litigation lawyer Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe to have me served with in June of 2012. The first letter, amongst other ludicrous accusations, falsely accused me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel on the unfounded basis that I had made, and this is an exact quote from the letter, unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape.
Morning.
Good morning, sir. Well, one of the big problems with Maitre Coulombe's arrogant and aggressive cease and desist demand letter is that the allegations that I actually had made about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and or rapists were not in the least bit unfounded. And after researching Canada's blasphemy law a little bit, immediately following receiving that cease and desist demand letter, I came to the conclusion that even if I or someone else actually did make unfounded, i.e. false, allegations about Unitarian Universalist ministers engaging in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, well, that might well be ordinary libel and slander and defamation, but it would not constitute the criminal act of blasphemous libel. Because the criminal act of blasphemous libel is essentially blaspheming against a religious community. The only circumstance under which I could be guilty of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blog posts that criticize Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists, or even make, false allegations about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists, is if such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape were held sacred and holy to the Unitarian Universalist religious community. And to the best of my knowledge, that is not the case, at least not yet. Might happen down the road a bit, but to the very best of my knowledge, Unitarian Universalists do not hold such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape to be sacred and holy to Unitarian Universalism. So yeah, we're looking at the wayside pulpit of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. I like to also refer to it as the wayward pulpit, because usually what's posted here is complete bullshit, outrageous hypocrisy, and so on. And this incredibly vaguely worded mission statement of the Unitarian Church of Montreal is a good example of that. Our spiritual community welcomes, nurtures, inspires, challenges. Together we take action in the world. Well, one could say, if one wished, our spiritual community welcomes abusive clergy. Our spiritual community nurtures abusive clergy. Our spiritual community inspires protest against abusive clergy and other Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. Our spiritual community challenges people who protest against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, which include, but by no means limited to, such despicable crimes of pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. And yes, Unitarian Universalists, indeed Montreal Unitarians, do in fact take action in the world. They take action, such as physically assaulting me. They take action such as repeatedly calling the police to interfere with my entirely legitimate peaceful public protest against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. They take action by falsely accusing me of crimes in an effort to shut down my protest. They take action by insulting me and defaming me. They take action in the world by, well, when it comes right down to it, being outrageous hypocrites. So, yeah, I just thought I'd want to make that point about the incredibly vague mission statement of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the various other not so pleasant things that the Unitarian Church of Montreal and the greater Unitarian Universalist spiritual community welcomes, nurtures, inspires, and challenges. And I could go on and on and on about the immoral, unethical, borderline criminal, outright criminal, and quite frankly, batshit crazy actions that certain Unitarian Universalists take in the world, and that Unitarian Universalism as a community, as represented by the Unitarian Universalist Association, takes in the world. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the Unitarian Universalist Association's false, blasphemous libel accusation in Bill Cosby-style legal bullying that seeks to cover up and hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers is taking action that is immoral, unethical, borderline criminal, in that falsely accusing someone of a crime is public mischief if you report that to the police. And indeed, it's batshit crazy. It's truly insane for Unitarian Universalists to falsely accuse someone of blasphemous libel. Well, you don't get to erase my chalk slogans today, Chloe, but maybe next time. So that's Chloe, one of the younger members of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. She's one of the people who take action in the world by erasing my chalk slogans that tell the truth about Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. So Chloe, unfortunately, is a participant in Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. When Chloe comes out of the church and grabs the garden hose over there and erases my chalk slogans that say things like Unitarian Universalist cover up clergy sex abuse and Unitarian Universalist misuse blasphemy law to cover up pedophilia and rape and so on, Chloe is covering up and hiding a legitimate protest against some of the less than moral, less than ethical actions that Unitarian Universalists take in the world. She's part of the UU problem. So anyhow, it is around coming up, I think, for 20 to 10 or so, maybe quarter to 10. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here because I have other things to do this morning. In fact, I already did a few things this morning. This is quite impromptu. I wasn't planning on coming necessarily at all because I actually had some things to do earlier and I have some things to do now. In fact, I haven't even had breakfast yet. But since I was between buses and since it was about a half hour between buses, I figured, well, the least thing I could do is come and make this video. So again, it is Sunday, the 18th of September, 2016. I'm in front of the so-called Unitarian Church of Montreal, and I am engaging in peaceful public protest against a variety of Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. The two main issues being the anti-religious intolerance and bigotry that far, far too many Unitarian Universalists engage in, and clergy misconduct of all kinds. So basically all forms of clergy abuse, be that abuse of a sexual nature or not. When people say clergy abuse, immediately people think in terms of clergy sexual abuse. But the fact of the matter is that there are non-sexual forms of clergy abuse, and some of the worst forms of non-sexual clergy abuse are actually worse injustices and abuses than some of the less serious forms of clergy sexual misconduct. You know, clergy sexual misconduct can include a minister making unwanted sexual advances on a parishioner. You know, that's the low end of it. You know, clergy misconduct can involve a Unitarian Universalist minister, you know, patting a congregant on the ass, you know, and saying how much they appreciate their butt, you know, that sort of thing. That's the low end of Unitarian Universalist clergy sexual misconduct. You know, the higher end is such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. And I'll leave it to the people to imagine just who those ministers might be, but there's more of them than people might think. I'm not saying there's a huge epidemic of pedophilia and rape in the Unitarian Universalist religious community, but there's more than is generally known about. You know, and Unitarian Universalists go to extreme lengths to keep it hidden as much as possible. So anyhow, we shall, I think, wrap things up. I see a few people going in, a little on the early side. And speaking of a few people, I was really surprised last Sunday when they had a kind of entry into the church ceremony. So there's a bunch of Unitarian Universalists out here, you know, on this entry into the church, and they were basically waiting to go in a kind of procession. And it really wasn't that many. I mean, in hindsight, I think it was around, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30 people max in this procession. You know, if that represented everyone going into the Unitarian Church of Montreal on the first, you know, Sunday of the church year on September 11th of 2016, well, that's not a good sign in terms of church attendance at the Unitarian Church of Montreal. You know, I did not see more than 40 people absolute maximum. So unless there were people inside already too, the turnout for the first, you know, Sunday, Water Communion Sunday, Ingathering Sunday, as Unitarians sometimes call it, was pathetically low. And it might have something to do with the fact that, you know, maybe more and more Montreal Unitarians are realizing that their church is stunningly hypocritical and just decided not to bother coming. So, now that's interesting. Unitarian Church, Ecclesia Unitarian, no mention of Montreal. Okay. So, oh, that's what I like here. Vivre ensemble, live in harmony. Well, we saw how Montreal Unitarian David excuse me, a little bit of a conflict between the guy's name and and the word harmony. Montreal Unitarian David Horan. We saw how he lived in harmony with me last Sunday when he physically assaulted me because I used the term willfully ignorant to describe him and pretty much every other member of the church. He took offense at me saying that he was wallowing in willful ignorance and psychological denial about, you know, the issues I'm protesting about. And he physically assaulted me. He rushed at me, and I had to walk backwards quite quickly to keep a distance from him. And then he smashed my camera. And then what else did he do? Yeah, he grabbed me. At a certain point, he shoved his face into my camera, which is ridiculous. So when he did that, I actually just stopped walking backwards, so it pressed into his face harder than he was expecting it to. Poor little fellow got a cut lip out of the deal. But, you know, if you're going to attack me, I'm going to defend myself. So, anyway, all this bullshit about living in harmony. You know, they talk about living in harmony, but they do very little to actually try living in harmony with people, especially people they have caused harm to. They are obstinately just incredibly stubborn in refusing to acknowledge any kind of wrongdoing, any kind of injustices, any kind of abuses. They just wallow in willful ignorance and psychological denial and stubborn refusal to recognize wrongdoing, and that is not living in harmony. That is not vivre ensemble. So again, you know, the Montreal Unitarian Universalist spiritual community welcomes abusive clergy like Reverend Ray Drennan. Welcomes, let's see, what else do they welcome? Well, they welcome people who physically assault people like David Horan, like Pierre Bennett, like Margot Ellis. They nurture people who are abusive both physically and psychologically and emotionally. They inspire people who are abusive both physically and psychologically, and they challenge anyone who challenges that stuff, you know. When I challenged Unitarian Universalist intolerance and bigotry, Unitarian Universalist clergy misconduct, and so on, well, they challenged me by kicking me out of the church. They challenged me by bringing false criminal charges against me. They challenged me by physically assaulting me. They challenged me by insulting me, and so on. So yes, Montreal Unitarians do in fact take action in the world, but a lot of that action is immoral, unethical, borderline criminal, outright criminal, and at times batshit crazy. On that note, we wrap up this 16-minute plus monologue about Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy on Sunday the 18th of 2016. That's it, Sunday the 18th of 2016. That's it for now.